Hello students, myself is Parminder Singh from Prab Kripa classes. Our today's topic is cell structure and functions. We have already uploaded a course on somewhat the same subject under the title The Fundamental Unit of Life. That was for class 9. Now we are uploading this course for class 8. This course has some additional questions like what is protoplasm, whether muscle cells are branched, what is nerve cell, what is their function, and why chloroplasts are found only in plant cells. In addition to that, at the end of the course, you will learn why the cell is called the structural and functional unit of life. Then, what are the three basic components of a cell? Then, organisms show variety in cell number, shape, and size. Discuss. Then, we will understand what is the difference between unicellular and multicellular organisms. Then, how does an amoeba obtain its food? Then, what is the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells? What would happen if the plasma membrane ruptures or breaks down? Why plasma membrane is called a selectively permeable membrane? In addition to cell membrane, there is a thick layer in the cells of plant cells. Discuss. What do you mean by protoplasm? Next, cytoplasm contains many smaller components called organelles. Name a few organelles. Plus, we will also do certain Ncert questions. First question pertains to discovery of the cell. That is, who discovered cell and how he discovered cell. Answer is, the cells were discovered by Robert Hooke in 1665. He looked at a slice of a cork through a self-designed microscope. Here is the photograph of Robert Hooke's microscope. He discovered that the cork looked like the structure of a honeycomb. He found that the cork was made of a large number of tiny compartments or boxes, and each box was separated from the other by a wall or partition. He called these tiny compartments or boxes as cells. His observations are recorded in his book Micrographia. Next question is, why cell is called the structural and functional unit of life? Cell is the structural and functional unit of life. The word cell is derived from the Latin word cellula, which means a little room. All living organisms can be classified as unicellular or multicellular. In the case of unicellular organisms, uni means single, cellular means celled, that is single celled organisms. Example is amoeba. In the case of unicellular organisms, a single cell provides structure for the body and performs all the functions, that is digestion, excretion, reproduction, etc. that takes place inside the body of an organism. You know that if this is the photograph of an amoeba, all the functions which a body has to perform are performed by this single celled. This is amoeba, which is a single celled organism. But in the case of multicellular organisms, for example, plants, animals, and human beings, there are a large number of cells. The number of cells vary from species to species. It has been approximated that human body contains trillions of cells. In the case of multicellular organisms, cells form the structure of the organism. a bunch of cells working together form the tissue. A bunch of tissues working together form the organ. A bunch of organs working together form the organ system. And organ systems further combine to form the organism. This happens in the case of multicellular organisms. Cells in the multicellular organisms vary in size and shape depending upon the function they perform. All the functions that take place inside the body of the multicellular organism are performed by the cells. Now the question is, organisms show variety in cell number, shape and size. In the case of unicellular organisms, a unicellular organism is also known as a single-celled organism. It is an organism that consists of a single cell. It means that all the life processes such as reproduction, feeding, digestion, excretion, etc. occur in one cell only. Some examples of unicellular organisms are bacteria, protozoa, amoebas, unicellular fungi, etc. We can classify the organisms according to number of cells they have. Unicellular means single-celled organisms. Multicellular means those organisms which have more than one cell. Examples of unicellular organisms have been given in this photograph. Example is that of amoeba and paramecium. Amoeba has no definite shape. It keeps on changing its shape. A white blood cell in the human blood is another example of a single cell which can change its shape. While WBC is a cell, amoeba is a full-fledged organism capable of independent existence. Now, the question before us is, how does an amoeba obtain its food? Amoeba is a single-celled microscopic organism. Microscopic means that organism which can be seen only with the help of a microscope. This organism is mostly found in pond water. It changes its shape and position constantly. Sometimes its shape may be this, other time its shape may be this. It goes on changing its shape and position. An amoeba takes its food by extending arm-like structures called pseudopodia from any part of the body. In this picture, you can see that a food in the shape of bacteria has come near to the amoeba on this side of his body. From here, he extends his false feet. These are false feet, which are called pseudopodia. These projections appear and disappear as amoeba moves or feeds. Amoebas eat algae, bacteria, plant cells, etc. Now, what are unicellular organisms? Those organisms which have more than one cell are called multicellular organisms. Multi means many, cellular means cell. All species of animals, land plants, and most fungi are multicellular. These are the photographs of few organisms who are multicellular. The number of cells in a multicellular organism may range from a few to billions. The number of cells being less in smaller organisms does not in any way affect the functioning of the organisms. All the cells in the case of multicellular organisms work in coordination with each other for the proper functioning of the organisms. The lifespan of a single-celled organism is short. Why the lifespan of a single-celled organism is short? Because all the functions such as excretion, digestion, reproduction have to be performed by the single cell, and there is a lot of work which the single celled organism has to perform. There is a lot of workload on it, while the lifespan of a multicellular organism is longer, due to the reason that the different cells carry out specific functions because they have different roles to perform. That is why the lifespan of multicellular organisms is longer as compared to single-celled organisms. Now we will see the difference between unicellular and multicellular organisms. As you know, the number of cells in case of unicellular organism is only 1, whereas in the case of multicellular organism consists of more than 1 cell. Size in case of unicellular organisms, cell size is larger, whereas in case of multicellular organisms, the size of the cell is smaller. In case of unicellular organisms, single cell performs all the life functions. For example, eating, reproducing, waste removal, moving, etc. In the case of multicellular organisms, specialized cells perform the different life functions. For example, nerve cells. Type of role. Cell has only one role as an individual. On the other hand, in the case of multicellular organisms, cell has dual role as an individual and as well as part of community. Workload in the case of unicellular organisms, workload on the cell is high. In the case of multicellular organisms, workload on an individual cell is very less. There is no division of labor in the case of unicellular organisms because all the functions have to be performed by the single cell, whereas there is division of labor in the case of multicellular organisms. Next is, in the case of unicellular organisms, death of the cell results into the death of the organism because there is only a single cell. But in the case of multicellular organisms, death of a few cells does not result in the death of the organism. There is no cell replacement in case of unicellular organisms, but in the case of multicellular organisms, old and weak cells are continuously replaced by new cells. Examples of unicellular organisms are bacteria, amoeba, yeast, paramecium, etc. In the case of multicellular organisms, examples are animals, plants, and some fungi. Now the question before us is with respect to shape and size of cells. The cells of different living organisms may differ in shape and size. A unicellular organism like amoeba has no definite shape and keeps on changing its shape. Unicellular means a single-celled organism. On one time, amoeba may have its shape as this. At the other time, it may have its shape like this. Or at the time of eating food, it may extend its feet, which is called pseudopodia if it is food. These are its false feet, which are known as pseudopodia. So a unicellular organism like amoeba has no definite shape and keeps on changing its shape and position. Within a multicellular organism, multi means many, cellular means cells. That is an organism which has a large number of cells, that is more than one. There are a variety of cells. For example, blood, muscle and nerve cells of human beings. Some cells are long while others are short. Some are circular while the shape of some cells is oval. Shape and size of cells are related to the specific function they perform. For example, a nerve cell is long and branched, meant for transmission of signals throughout our body. We understand with the help of an example. Suppose this is a person. Here is brain our. If we touch anything which is hot, put our hand here, we immediately feel that the particular substance is hot, and we withdraw our hands from that hot substance. Why? Because the nerve cells transmit the signal from our hand to the brain immediately. That is why the nerve cells are long and branched for transmission of signals throughout our body. On the other hand, a muscle cell is small and spindle shaped, which helps in movement. You can see here that red blood cells are of spherical shape. These are nerve cells which are long and branched. These are spindle shaped muscle cells. Components of the cell are enclosed in a membrane. This membrane provides shape to the cells of plants and animals. As you know, we are talking about the cell membrane or plasma membrane. Cell wall, an additional covering over the cell membrane in plant cells, provides shape and rigidity to these cells. As you know that in the case of plants and animal cells, cell membrane or plasma membrane is present. However, in the case of plant cells, an additional covering is there, which is extra to the plasma membrane, and that covering is known as cell wall, which is lies outside the cell membrane or plasma membrane. The size of the cells in living organisms may be as small as a micrometer or micron, or may be as large as a few centimeters. The smallest cell is in bacteria, and the largest cell is the egg of an ostrich. Next, another point to remember, the size of cells has no relation with the size of the body of the animal or plant. It is not necessary that the cells in elephant will be much bigger than those in a rat. The size of the cell is related to its function. For example, nerve cells both in elephant and rat are long and branched. They perform the same function, that is of transferring messages. Now, another important question pertains to the structure of the cell, or what are the different parts of the cell. The word cell has been taken from the Latin word cellula, which means small room. The cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. If we study a cell under a microscope, we would come across three features in almost every cell. Suppose you see a cell under a microscope, you will see this is the outer covering of the cell, which is called plasma membrane, or it may also be called cell membrane. Then there is a nucleus present in the cell. Then inside the plasma membrane, there is a gel-like fluid all over here, which is known as cytoplasm. And in the cytoplasm, there are a large number of different type of organelles which we will study in the next slides. So you will please observe that a cell consists of three parts: plasma membrane, nucleus, and the third is cytoplasm. Within the cytoplasm lie extremely small but distinct structures called organelles. A cell contains organelles such as nucleus, then there are bodies like Golgi apparatus, then there is another organelle which is known as mitochondria, then there are ribosomes which lie attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, or they may be floating in the cytoplasm, and there is also endoplasmic reticulum which is another organelle present in the cytoplasm. Animal cell also contains little digestive pouches called lysosomes. We must remember that lysosomes are the organelles which are present only in the animal cell and not in the plant cells. Plant cells may have also additional organelles such as plastids. As already discussed, plant cells also have cell wall which is not present in the animal cells. The cell's organelles are isolated from the surrounding environment by a plasma membrane. This is the plasma membrane. If this is the outer environment of the cell, this is the plasma membrane which keeps the internal contents of the cell isolated from the external environment. So nucleus is what? It houses the genetic material DNA. What is Golgi body, which is also known as Golgi or Golgi apparatus? It distributes macromolecules. Mitochondria, they generate energy. Mitochondria is also known as powerhouse of the cell. Ribosomes, they produce protein. So you will please observe that we have so far discussed that normally the cell consists of three parts, which is plasma membrane, nucleus, and cytoplasm, and there are many organelles present inside the cytoplasm which are now maybe known as nucleus, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, lysosomes, etc. Next. Now we will discuss the outer covering which is present in the plant cell as well as in the animal cell. However, as already discussed, plant cells also have an additional covering outside the plasma membrane which is known as cell wall. So we are here talking about the plasma membrane. Here is the photograph of an animal cell. Here you will see that the outer covering is this. This is plasma membrane. Plasma membrane is a biological membrane that surrounds the cytoplasm of a cell. All you see here in is cytoplasm. This is cytoplasm, this is cytoplasm, this is cytoplasm. It separates the contents of the cell. What? Plasma membrane separates the contents of the cell from the materials outside the cell. It holds the contents of the cell in place. Plasma membrane is semi-permeable and selectively permeable because it can either let a substance pass through freely, pass through to a limited extent, or not pass through at all. It means that plasma membrane, which is this plasma membrane, this is the plasma membrane, outer covering. it may allow any substance to pass through the plasma membrane and go into the cell, or it may not allow at all, or it may allow only to a limited extent to pass through it. So a question which is very important arises: why plasma membrane is called a selectively permeable membrane? Because it allows only selected substances to enter and leave the cell. Plasma membrane allows oxygen, carbon dioxide and water to enter and leave the cell, but it does not allow the movement of many other substances. For example, it does not allow cytoplasm to flow out. This is the fluid-like structure here. This is our fluid-like structure which is called cytoplasm. So the plasma membrane does not allow the cytoplasm to flow outside the cell. In animals, plasma membrane is the outer boundary of the cell, as we have already discussed. In case of animal cells, the outer covering is plasma membrane. But if we talk about the plant cells, there is an additional covering outside the plasma membrane, which will be called as cell wall. In case of plants and prokaryotes, it is usually covered by a cell wall. Now, another question arises: if the plasma membrane ruptures or breaks down, what will happen? If the plasma membrane ruptures or breaks down, there will be free movement of all the substances in and out of the cell. Suppose this is the cell and this is the outer covering plasma membrane. If it breaks, suppose it breaks from here, what will happen? All the contents, whether these are organelles or cytoplasm, they will flow out, or whatever is present outside the cell will go inside. So here we will read the contents of the cell, that is cell organelles and cytoplasm, will leak out and the cell will not be able to perform its basic functions. For example, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Ribosomes are associated with protein manufacturing. So the different organelles of the cell will not be able to perform their functions. So such a cell with ruptured or breakdown plasma membrane will die. This is also important point. The plasma membrane is flexible and it is made up of protein and lipid molecules. So next question arises with regard to cell wall. As already discussed, in the case of animal cells, outer covering is known as plasma membrane, but in the case of plant cells, there is an additional covering. Suppose this is the plasma membrane which is present in case of plant cells as well as in animal cells. But if we talk about plant cells, there is an outer covering again outside the plasma membrane which is known as cell wall. Here in this picture you can see that the outer covering is cell wall. This is the internal covering which is known as plasma membrane or cell membrane, which is also present in case of animal cells. So here we will read: plant cells in addition to plasma membrane have another rigid outer covering called the cell wall. Cell wall is also found in case of bacterial and fungal cells. The cell wall lies outside the plasma membrane or cell membrane. The cell wall is absent in the case of animal cells. Cell wall provides structural support and protection to the cell. It is also important that cell wall is mainly composed of cellulose. So now we will learn about cytoplasm. It is a gel-like fluid which is present inside the cell in which all the organelles are floating. It is composed of, that is cytoplasm is composed of water, salts, and various organic molecules. You can see here that this is cytoplasm, this is cytoplasm, this is cytoplasm, this is the fluid-like material. It also contains, that is, cytoplasm contains many specialized cell organelles. You can see here that this is nucleus, this is mitochondria, this is endoplasmic reticulum, this is Golgi bodies. Here you can see ribosomes and other organelles. So these organelles are mitochondria, Golgi bodies, ribosomes, lysosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, etc. Each of these organelles perform a specific function for the cell. Cytoplasm is the ocean in which all the organelles float. Within the cytoplasm, materials move by diffusion. Now we discuss about an important part of the cell, which is known as nucleus. Nucleus is the control center of the cell. It is the oval shaped body. You can see here that it is the oval shaped body which is floating in the cytoplasm. We can see the nucleus easily with the help of a microscope. It consists of nuclear membrane. This is the nuclear membrane outside. Then there is nucleoplasm. Then there is nucleolus. This is nucleolus. Then there are chromosomes present in the nucleus, and it also contains genes. Nucleus is separated from the cytoplasm by a membrane called nuclear membrane. Nucleus has its own covering which separates it from the cytoplasm, and this covering is known as nuclear membrane. There are pores in this nuclear membrane that allow selected material to go in and out of the nucleus. With the help of a microscope of higher magnification, we can see a still smaller spherical body inside the nucleus, which is known as nucleolus. This is the nucleolus. In addition to that, nucleus also contains thread-like structures called chromosomes. Chromosomes carry genes and help in inheritance or transfer of characters from parents to the offsprings. In case of prokaryotes, nuclear region is purely defined due to the absence of nuclear membrane, and in the case of prokaryotes, nuclear region is known as nucleoid. That is, nucleus is, we can also say that nucleus is absent in case of prokaryotes. In the case of eukaryotes, nuclear region is well defined or well developed, and nucleus is also surrounded by a nuclear membrane. If there is a question in the exam whether nucleus is present in the case of prokaryotes, our answer will be no. Nucleus is not present because the nuclear region is poorly defined. The entire content of a living cell is known as protoplasm. We have earlier read about cytoplasm. Now we are reading about protoplasm. The entire content of a living cell is known as protoplasm. It includes cytoplasm and nucleus. Protoplasm is called the living substance of the cell. There may be a question in the exam which is called the living substance of the cell. Our answer will be protoplasm. Now we discuss about another organelle which is found inside the cell, which is known as vacuoles. A vacuole is a membrane bound organelle which is present in plant and fungal cells and some protist animal and bacterial cells. The vacuole is filled with water, sugar, minerals, and proteins. And a question may arise in the exam whether animal cells have vacuoles. So answer is animal cells may have no or many small vacuoles. In the case of plants, most mature plant cells have one large vacuole. Here you can see that this is the picture of a plant cell, and a large vacuole is present in the case of plant cells. Now another question may arise, what is the function of vacuoles? The main function of vacuole is to handle waste products or store useful substances like water, proteins, etc. that the cell will need later on. Here you see the picture of an animal cell. It is having some small vacuoles, whereas in the case of plant cell, the vacuole is quite large in size. In the case of single-celled organisms like amoeba, the food vacuole contains food items that the amoeba has consumed. Now we discuss about another organelle which is present in the case of only plant cells. Animals cells do not have plastids. Why? Let us read it. The plastid is a double membrane bound organelle. It is found in the cells of plants, algae, and other eukaryotic organisms. Like mitochondria, the plastids also have their own DNA and ribosomes. The plastids provide color to fruits and flowers. Plastids are involved in the manufacture and storage of food. Plastids are known as kitchen of the cell because plastids contain a pigment called chlorophyll, which plays an important role in the process of preparation of food by the plant cells called photosynthesis. From the picture, you will see that the plastids are of three types: chromoplast, chloroplast, and leucoplast. We will discuss it one by one. Leucoplast. These are white colored or colorless plastids. They do not participate in photosynthesis. They are primarily organelles which store foods such as starch, oils, and protein granules. Chromoplasts are colored plastids other than chloroplast, typically containing yellow or orange pigment. Now we discuss about the chloroplast. These are green colored plastids which help in the synthesis of food due to presence of chlorophyll. Chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, that is why they help in the synthesis of food. Now we will find out the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. First of all, we will read on the basis of the nucleus. Cells are of two types: prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells are those cells where nuclear region is poorly defined. That, in other words, we can say that nucleus is absent in the case of prokaryotic cells, whereas in the case of eukaryotic cells, a well-defined nucleus is present, which is surrounded by nuclear membrane. So we will discuss the difference between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. First of all, the size. Size of prokaryotic cells is generally small. Eukaryotic cells are generally large. Prokaryotic cells are mostly unicellular, that is single-celled organisms. Eukaryotic cells are found in unicellular as well as multicellular organisms. Existence. Prokaryotic cells are a primitive type of cell. Eukaryotic cells are an advanced cell which have evolved from prokaryotic cell. In case of prokaryotic cells, nuclear region is poorly defined due to the absence of nuclear membrane, and the nuclear region in the case of prokaryotic cells is known as nucleoid. You can see here in this picture, this is the nucleoid, whereas in the case of eukaryotic, this is the nucleus region. This is the nucleus. In the case of eukaryotic cells, well developed nuclear region is present, which is surrounded by a nuclear membrane. It is a nuclear membrane. Organelles. Membrane bound cell organelles are absent in the case of prokaryotes. No cell organelle is present. In the case of eukaryotes, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, lysosomes, etc. are present. Ribosomes. 70 S-type ribosomes are present in the case of prokaryotic cells. In the case of eukaryotic cells, 80 S-type ribosomes are present. Prokaryotic cells are of simple structure. In the case of eukaryotic cells, their structure is more complex. Chromosome in the case of prokaryotic cell is single, whereas eukaryotic cells have more than one chromosome. DNA nature in the case of prokaryotic cells is circular, whereas it is linear in the case of eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells are found in the case of bacteria, blue-green algae, and microplasma. In case of eukaryotic cells, they are found in the case of plants, animals, and fungi. Here is the pictorial difference between the two types of cells. Now, we will understand the difference between plant cells and animal cells. This is the picture of animal cell. This is the plant cell. Animal cells are generally small in size and their shape is round or irregular. Plant cells are generally larger in size and shape is rectangular. In the case of animal cells, cell wall is not there. Outer covering is known as plasma membrane. Whereas in the case of plant cells, outer covering is known as cell wall. No chloroplast is present in the case of animal cells. However, chloroplast is present in the case of plant cells because chloroplast help in the synthesis of food. Animals cannot prepare their food, so chloroplast is not present in animal cells. Lysosomes, which contain digestive enzymes, are present in the case of lysosomes. This is the picture of lysosome, which is present in the case of animal cells. Plants, in the case of plant cells, lysosomes are absent. An animal cell can often change its shape. Plant cells cannot change its shape. Another point of difference is with respect to vacuoles. Animal cells contain no or small vacuoles, whereas in the case of plant cells, a mature plant cell contains a large central vacuole. This is the vacuole which is large in size. So we will conclude this course. Our conclusion is all organisms are made of smaller parts called organs. Organs are still made of smaller parts. The smallest living part of an organism is cell. As you know, first comes cell, From cell come tissues, tissues form organ, organ jointly form organ system, and many organ system join to form the organism. Cells were first observed in cork by Robert Hooke in 1665. Cells exhibit a variety of shapes and sizes. Number of cells vary from organism to organism. Some cells are big enough to be seen with naked eye. Hence, egg is an example. Some organisms are single-celled, while other organisms contain large number of cells. Single cell in the case of unicellular organism performs all the basic functions like eating, moving, reproduction, etc. Whereas in the case of multicellular organisms, all these functions are performed by a variety of cells. The cell has three main parts, which is plasma membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus. Nucleus is separated from the cytoplasm by the outer covering, which is known as nuclear membrane. Cells without well-organized nucleus, that is lacking nuclear membrane, are called prokaryotic cells. Plants differ from animal cells as they have an additional covering around the cell membrane. This is cell membrane. This is the cell wall in case of plant cells. Green plastids containing chlorophyll are called chloroplasts. Plant cells has a large central vacuole, whereas animal cells have no or many small vacuoles. If you like our video, please like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you.